Hello and welcome to Rush Hour. In this next half an hour, we'll talk about all the news that matters to you around the globe. But let's get started first on the news of Trump looking to fire Lisa Cook. And now Lisa Cook has retaliated by suing Donald Trump over his move to oust her from Fed board. The governor had already filed a petition, although the details of the petition are not known. But what we know till now, Donald Trump had earlier announced that she should be fired from the board on the reason of two purchases which she has done in personal capacity in 2021. But on the same day itself, Lisa Cook had stated that she will not do so. In fact, will take a legal recourse, and now the legal recourse had been taken by Lisa Cook. And to discuss about this, we have with us Mark Chandler, Chief Market Strategist and Managing Partner at Bannockburn Capital Markets. Mark, welcome to this special discussion. My first question to you is this more of a legal battle, or you see this a bigger picture? Meaning, first time in 100 years, this kind of suit has been filed in court now. Earlier, Donald Trump has announced that she should resign, but this battle is going to courts.
So I agree. I think that both things are true. One is a legal issue. It's a question of whether the president has the authority to fire Governor Cook, whether it reached the standards of cause. Usually in the United States, cause, dismissing an employee for cause, typically refers to their performance on the job. Secondly, I think that many people think that what President Trump is doing is further trying to get control of the Federal Reserve by using the flimsiest excuse to try to fire a governor. I say flimsy excuse because all the evidence is not yet in the public. And in the U.S., we make a big distinction between primary residence, which is the place that you're going to live in, and that you typically will get a lower interest rate on the mortgage. But what it looks like Governor Cook agreed to was that they would be personal residences. When I was younger, I had an apartment in New York City and a vacation house. I spent a lot of time, as much time as I could in my vacation house, and I regarded them both as my personal residences, not primary residences. So this is a murky legal issue that'll have to get sorted out. But the broader issue is the independence of the Federal Reserve. And even though it's being challenged, I think the market is still believing that the Federal Reserve's credibility, its independence, will be preserved.
That is one question which everybody is asking, as you mentioned, about independence of Federal Reserve. Now, this is not the first time that Donald Trump has made comments against Federal Reserve. In fact, he has been quite vocal against Federal Reserve not cutting the rates. In fact, he has said several times that they should do it. And now deciding to at least fire Lisa Cook. Does that look like that now the politics is having an overarching step over independence of Fed here?
No, I still think it's a bit early to reach that conclusion. The reason is that at the last FOMC meeting, the last time the Federal Reserve met, two governors, both were appointed by Trump incidentally, voted in favor of cutting interest rates. They dissented. That was highly unusual. But a couple of days after they dissented, the U.S. reported a very poor jobs report on August 1st. And it looks like since then, a majority of the Federal Reserve has come over and supports a September rate cut. Last Friday at Jackson Hole, where the Federal Reserve had this big symposium, Federal Reserve Chair Powell seemed to recognize that the risks between the two Fed's mandates, price stability and full employment, had shifted, where the unemployment rate has been rising. And next Friday, it looks like the U.S. will report another weak jobs number, including another rise in the unemployment rate. And a few days later, the government will announce benchmark revisions for the past year of the non-farm payroll data. And that also looks to point to a generally weaker trajectory of job growth. So I think the Federal Reserve, unlike the president, who believes the economy is very strong and thinks that inflation doesn't exist, the Federal Reserve thinks but I should say that the Federal Reserve is going to cut rates because it's worried about the deterioration in the labor market while recognizing that price pressures remain elevated.
That is a fair point, Chandler, but the point I'm making here is Federal Reserve is going to have their own assessment of economy, on own assessment of whether or not they should cut rates, and that should be independent. But the question here is the word independent itself, because now Trump had been maintaining that the steps which has been taken by Federal Reserves are not proper. Now saying that he should fire Lisa Cook. Don't you think he is overstepping in his authority? And that is the bigger question which everybody is asking.
I do think that people are asking that, and it's going to be for the judicial branch to decide whether he has the authority to fire a Federal Reserve governor for something that she's alleged to do. Remember, in the U.S., we have this presumption of innocence until proven guilty. So she's not even been found guilty. She hasn't been charged with anything yet. So it's not clear the cause. So one, I think, is the legal issue, and that still has to be worked out. But the second, and I think more important issue that you raise, is about the broader independence of the central bank. And so far, I'd say that while President Trump has tried to encroach upon its independence, so far it hasn't proven to be very effective.
All right, point taken. But I've also understand about this news, how it will have impact on markets per se, particularly bond market. Do you think there will be a reaction on this?
Well, there hasn't been, and I think that this filing by Governor Cook and her lawyers to protest the president trying to fire her has been well known for this week. It was the obvious step she was going to take. And you know, despite all this talk about the large U.S. budget deficit, despite Trump's attempt to get control or influence the Federal Reserve, you know, the U.S. 10-year bond market, the Treasury market, it has been the best performing within the G10 countries this year. The yields have fallen by more than 30 basis points. Most of European, Japanese, East Asian interest rates have risen. Australia, New Zealand's 10-year yields are off about 7 basis points this year. So in the big picture, I'd say that the outperformance of the U.S. 10-year Treasury market still speaks to the relative independence that the market sees that the Federal Reserve still has.
All right, thank you so much, Mark, with that analysis of Lisa Cook now going to court and suing Donald Trump on his decision of firing Lisa Cook. And all in all, it is politics versus policy, and more importantly, whether or not Federal Reserve is truly independent is the question which everybody is asking. And these proceedings, these legal proceedings, which are expected to continue for a while, will answer those. But moving on.